Up next with Cosatu. Oh no, we're going to continue now. So, joining me now to continue the discussion on our unemployment crisis in the country is Mike Shingange. He's Cosatu's Deputy President. Thanks very much for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much.
Good
Thanks
stuff.
for having us.
Some in the private sector argue that unions actually contribute to unemployment when they push too hard in wage negotiations, almost blocking out new entrants into firms because, you know, the costs of labour become so high and it disincentivizes firms to employ new people. How do you respond to that?
Well, our view is that, in fact, the private sector contributes to the unemployment because they are too quick to resort to retrenchment workers every time on a slight provocation of an economic decline. But also, when everything else that contribute to a standard of living for population goes up, you can't expect that the workers should not get an increase. In fact, in the past 10 years, we have been seeing a wage contract. In other words, the wages have been frozen for the lack of a better word. So in our view, it's not correct. In fact, the question of unemployment and the economy, my view is that there's a saying that says people have interpreted the world in different ways, philosophers in the past. But the point is that is to change it. It doesn't look like anyone is prepared to change the way we've been doing things for the past 25 years.
Yeah.
At our view, that is the biggest problem.
In Cosatu's view, what is it that we need to do? Because as you say, things are not working out. We've had high unemployment, above 20% for several years now. And obviously, whatever initiatives are in play, they're just not working.
Look, there's a talk for the past 3 or 4 years about a radical economic transformation. But our view now is that it's just rhetoric. Both as a private sector and as government, it doesn't seem to be bold enough to pursue that policy because everything else that we've been doing since 1994, having inherited economic policies that were derived to segregate the majority of this country, not to participate and not to grow. We inherited those policies. We didn't want to tinker with them. We inherited economic policy, particularly in the mining sector, that was perpetuating a cheap labor in kind of the. Now we continued to bend backwards to the big corporate business in this country, to even lowering the corporate tax. We changed it from 34% to 28% now. But they've not, what they rewarded us with, they went on and retrenched workers. We thought that when we leverage on that, we are trying to help them to preserve the jobs or create more. The very same mining sector is the largest, followed by the banking sector on the recent quarter to retrench workers. So we think we need to focus more on helping the people that we're seeing now in Eastern Cape that are trying, the small businesses. Those are the ones that need the government intervention, not the big corporate. Like your previous speakers said here, we're sitting with 2 trillion rands of the capital that is sitting there. We're not able to say to them, hey, you can't sit with this money, profit that you've made out of South African blood and sweat, but you're sitting with it, you're not investing back in the economy. We are not able to say to this big business, hey, you can't make money here and invest somewhere else. I mean, some of the South African companies, when you look at them, their portfolio of investment is mostly outside the country. But it's a profit they made it in South Africa. They're creating jobs somewhere else outside the country. We don't seem to be able to manage those ones. And then we're going to cry and say, no, unions are the ones that are stifling the unemployment.
Yeah, you're touching lots of hot topics there, and we've only got 5 minutes to talk, so I'm going to move on swiftly with my next question. What is it that Cosatu is doing in its engagements, maybe at the NEDLAC level, to contribute to making a dent in the unemployment rate figure? Because obviously you're worried about your members, that is people who are working. And obviously when they're threatened with retrenchment, you also do your utmost to try and protect them from becoming unemployed. But what are you doing to help those who are already unemployed? We're
not worried only about those who are employed. We're actually, when the unemployment goes up like it has now, it places the burdens on those who are employed now to keep the people eating. I mean, each one of us, when we work, when we get paid either on the 15 or on the 25, there are about 15 people that are looking to get something from you.
That's right.
So the more the unemployment, the more the burden to those who are employed. So it's not true that we're only concerned about those who are employed. We have been saying, for instance, that we said we need government to establish, at least for its part. We see we have already said about the private sector. For its part, they must have a retail banks that is going to help in regional banks, the not-for-profit banks in the province and the region, that are going to lend the people who are fixing shoes, that are going to lend the people who are selling clothes, that in order for them to have a decent shelter, that's going to be attractive for people to come and buy their product, but also that's going to create jobs at the local level, because the big corporate have failed for the past 25 years. That's one. The state must once and for all decide how many state-owned enterprises they need in the country and for what reasons, for what purposes. For now, we're all over the place. We don't know what we want to do with SOEs. Those are the ones that the state are going to use to leverage and participate and disrupt the economy. That's what we're saying. Somebody spoke about the Reserve Bank's role. Our view is that the Reserve Bank is supposed to regulate the commercial banks to dedicate at least 30% of their lending into developmental or creating of jobs. Currently, the Reserve Bank or the commercial banks, the only thing they do, they lend you money in order to consume, not for productive lending. We're saying no, change the mandate. There's a hula baloo, the sky wants to fall when we insist that the Reserve Bank mandate must at least change so that when I want 500,000, not to buy a car, not to buy a house, but to create a spaza shop or to build a container for me to fix the shoes in, I must be able to be allowed to get such a lending. For now, I'm not allowed to do so.
Before we run out of time, and this is important, I mean, in South Africa, we talk a lot and there's very little implementation, but the talking is important. Do you think that there's a better relationship between Labour, government and the private sector now than the so-called Zuma years in terms of being able to better reach a consensus on these very issues? I mean, the bank idea, the non-profit bank idea that you're raising is a very good idea. Yes.
No, at least on the part of government and the Labour, we think we're getting there. But remember, the state and the policy, particularly the economic policy directive in this country, is a very serious contested terrain. For instance, we had in a presidential job summit last year, we had agreed on a moratorium on a retrenchment while we're looking at ways of creating new jobs. But what did the private sector do? They rushed into retrenchments. Even today, the banks so many of them. So in other words, they have not lived up to their commitment that we signed in the job summit. For our part as Labour, if you remember when the EDCOM was about to lose 40,000 jobs and the 100,000 that were going to be lost, the firms that are supplying the EDCOM, we came in, we used our UIF money, we used the PIC money to save the job. So we have played our part as Labour, but we have not seen that part coming from the private sector's point of view.
Mike, more to talk about, but not enough time. That was Mike Shingange. He's the Deputy President at Cosatu. We continue with our jobs focus after a short break.